Hey Japanobloggers! Today Kyle and I are going to be talking about the different ways that we're getting ready to move to Japan. We're going to talk about some of the research that we've done in order to get ready, and then how we've actually implemented the research that we've come up with to get ready to go over. So let's get going.
The first thing that we're doing is we're taking our shoes off when we get into the house. In Japan, they have genkans. Well, America doesn't have that, but our household does. It's not perfect, but it works for us.
The second thing that we learned about Japan is they hang dry their clothes. Japan doesn't have a lot of physical space to hold dryers like we do here in America. It's also not a really common thing. Now if you have a house, that's obviously one thing. Kyle and I will be living in an apartment for a while, so we're going to have to worry about making sure we have time to dry our clothes, which isn't a bad, situation to be in. We actually took some time. We found these little extra hanger things on Amazon, and they work great for holding socks, or as we see in this one over here, pants and shorts and other things that we don't want on hangers. But again, hang drying clothes, not the worst situation in the world to be in.
Another thing that we're doing is we're choosing to hand wash and hand dry our dishes. We have a dishwasher, but we're choosing not to use it because chances are in Japan we won't have a dishwasher. What is manly?
A big aspect of our lives that we're having to change in order to get ready for Japan has to do with food and how we prepare it. One thing that's really different is the fact that the Japanese eat a lot of rice. Now in America, there are not a whole lot of dishes that are strictly rice-based. While in Japan, there are a ton, and they'll just eat rice plain, by itself, maybe a little bit of salt. Another aspect of having to prepare the food is actually the size of the stove that we could be given. Living in an apartment, we're probably going to have one, maybe 3 eyes at the most. Here in our house in Waynesville, we've got a fairly typical stove. It's got 4 eyes. How are we dealing with this? We're restricting the amount of eyes that we use. And by doing that, we're also trying to learn to make a lot of one-pot meals. The one-pot meals is a good thing because I might only have 1 eye, we might only have 3 eyes. We'll see. But preparing food, not bad.
When it comes to manners in Japan, a lot of things are different than America. First things first, have a meal. Itadakimasu. That means thanks for the meal, and is said before you start eating. So now I can eat. But let's say I'm done with the meal. At that time, I say, "Gochishou-sama deshita," which means thanks again for the meal. Now there are a few other things as far as Japanese manners go, including bowing. But with bowing, that kind of gets a little detailed. We'll explain more in the blog. Another thing that we're going to have to get used to is the lack of sarcasm. In America, we use sarcasm every day. In Japan, sarcasm doesn't fly.
Along with preparing food, we're going to have to actually learn how to eat food a little bit differently. Japan is starting to westernize, so they've got plenty of dishes nowadays that require a traditional fork, spoon, and knife. But most of the traditional food of Japan is eaten with chopsticks. Now, Kyle and I are already pretty good at chopsticks. We need to get better. Now, there's some chopstick etiquette that we do need to learn, and we know a little bit about it. First off, don't do that. This is considered rude, though I have heard from other sources that this signifies that you're done with the meal. If you want to put down your chopsticks while you're eating, you use a chopstick rest. Or you can make one if you have the little paper sleeve for the breaking chopsticks that you get from other restaurants. Don't have a pair of those right now. I'll cover that in a different video. Now, there's some things we're going to learn while we're in Japan about Chopsticks that we'll update you on later. But another thing to learn is Chopsticks.
Now we've covered a lot of things that we can do in Japan. Let's cover a few things that we can't do.
One of the biggest factors right now that we're having to deal with Japan, especially the fact that I'm holding interviews, well, I was holding interviews in Japan, is the fact that from where we are in Waynesville, they are 14 hours ahead of us. They obviously see tomorrow before we do, which, once we get there after a couple of weeks, we're going to be fine. Another thing having to deal with time is how they actually read time. They read from 0 hours at midnight to 24 hours. So it's going to be interesting, kind of learning to read military time. The last job we had helped us a little bit with it, but we're not perfect.
One other thing that we can't do in America is learn how to use a public transit system such as a train. Here in America, we get in a car, we can go anywhere at any time. In Japan, we have a certain time schedule we have to meet, which is the train system. In Waynesville, we don't have a train system, so we're going to have to get used to that.
Another aspect that we're going to have to get used to is the fact that Japan has a lack of space. Now, we're not only talking about our house, we're also talking about Japan in general. They're about the size of California, which means that a lot of people are crammed in a very small area. Mainly Tokyo. We're not going to be in Tokyo a lot. But the house that we live in now in Waynesville is right around 900 or so square feet. That's considered small in America. Take that, divide it by about half, and that's probably about as big as some of the apartments we're going to be able to get in Japan are going to be. The apartments in Japan range from micro apartments, which are very popular in Tokyo, where there are a lot more people crammed in together, to possibly getting a house. That's expensive, costs land, different story. In a later video, we'll actually do a quick tour of our house and then compare it to the place that we get in Japan. The other thing we're going to have to deal with space is our cats. We have 2 of them coming. Luckily, here, as we can see, they're kind of on the small-ish side, but trying to find a place that can accommodate 2 even small cats is going to be interesting, and we'll see if they go crazy. But physical space in Japan is going to be lacking a lot, and we're going to have to get used to that kind of quickly because we're going to be piled on top of each other like sardines. But we'll let you know how that goes later.
So there's a lot of stuff that we covered in this video, things that we can do and things that we can't. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you can think of that we just haven't had time to film for. But leave us some comments below or at japanoblog.com/preppingforjapan and we'll respond to them the best we can, along with making other videos about what we can and can't do as we actually make our way to Japan. Until then, see you next time!